How's it going, guys? Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Phil Talk Sports Podcast. Today is June 20th, 2022. It is my birthday. It is my 30th birthday. And what do you do when your birthday falls on a Monday and everybody else is working? Well, you stay home and you record a podcast. So hope everyone's doing well out there. A lot of good sports to talk about. We just crowned an NBA champion. We have a Stanley Cup champion that might get settled sooner than we all thought. We have a spring football league that's actually made it into its playoffs, and some other soccer news. That's why I'm rocking the Italy kit today. So a little bit of soccer news thrown in here at the end. Let's start at the very beginning. Let's start at the NBA Finals. My prediction from my last episode by myself turned out to be correct. We had Boston and Golden State in the finals, and Golden State was able to take care of business in, I believe it was six. Some people thought would go to 7. It definitely looked that way for a minute. Golden State just seemed to have kind of like what I said. I'm not going to take full credit for it because I didn't pick how many games it would be necessarily, but I felt that most of that team is going to have experience in this big game in the finals, right? Not the entire team. This is a very different Warrior looking team than we've seen in the past. No Durant, obviously. Clay is not the Clay of old, although he had his moments in this. Guys like Jordan Poole and Wiggins showed up big and really were the difference, but obviously nobody was better on the court for these 6 games, and Steph Curry winning his first finals MVP. And Steph is one of those guys that even if it's the Warriors aren't your team, and there's very few people that they are, there's some bandwagoners that have jumped on in the past 5 or so years, 10 years at this point. But Steph Curry is a very likable player. So a lot of people were happy to see him get that ring post Durant, because I know a lot of people, once Durant jumped on the Warriors, were like, oh, that's the only reason the Warriors kept going. And while this might be, if you line up all the Warriors teams that have won championships in this modern era, you might say that this was the worst Golden State team to win a title, because statistically there has to be one, right? But at the same time, this is the one I feel like they should be most proud of, because you had Draymond Green, later in his career. You had Klay Thompson coming back from his injury. You had a guy like Andrew Wiggins that everybody wrote off as, a difference maker. He might be a decent scorer on a bad team. That was about as good as you would expect from him after his, I don't know that I want to call him a draft bust in Minnesota, but clearly a ceiling, a guy that you're not going to put a lot of stock into to help you win a title. And he was just that. He was a difference maker throughout this year. Jordan Poole off the bench had great moments, had some, half court shots for 3, looking like Steph for a couple moments at a time. But Steph Curry getting that 4th ring and really solidifying this team as a dynasty. I feel like it's a dynasty anyway. I think once you win 3 in a reasonable amount of time, but to win 4 in 8 years and go to, I think, 6 of the 8 finals yourself, definitely a dynasty. And I don't know that it's over necessarily. I don't think they can run this exact squad back and expect to get back to the finals. I don't think that would happen. That's a little unreasonable for me. But there's some moves that they can make, and they've made it very clear that Draymond and Clay, regardless of their production, are basically going to be Warriors for life. And that's refreshing to see a franchise really just take care of their players for what they've already done. And while it may hurt their chance to repeat in the immediate future, I think Steph, his style of play suits him to play a whole lot more. And it's not very taxing on his body, while he's dealt with some minor injuries, of course. But Golden State picking up the win, getting their 4th title in 8 years, and their 6th trip to the finals in that same 8 years. It's impressive. It's a team that, prior to this group of guys being there, Golden State was not a team that anybody talked about, anybody cared about. And they're the flagship of the NBA and will be for at least a few more years. So the dynasty strikes back. And congrats to the actual Warrior fans out there, the very few that are true diehard Warrior fans. And Boston, I think they were about a year early getting where I think the Milwaukee injuries, I think if Middleton's playing in that Boston series with the Bucks, that they don't quite make it. We know that the Miami Heat were an ill-timed 3 going in away from making it to the finals. Jimmy Butler making that 3-point shot with still like 20-something seconds left on the clock. Probably could have ran a better play there. But everyone's already put him through the ringer for that. But I don't want to say this team was lucky, because they earned their way into this. They beat Milwaukee. They beat Miami. They swept Brooklyn, which is not something anybody saw coming going into that. So they deserve to be there. They played well enough to be there. There was some circumstances that made it a little bit easier to get there. And I do think Boston has a chance to come back. Maybe not immediately next year, but Tatum is now flirting with that superstar level. He went from a good player on the Celtics to, if a few more things go his way. He did disappear a little bit in some of these finals games, but he's also like 23, 24. So he has room to grow. Not everybody is an instant pot superstar. Might take a little bit more, but a good run for the Celtics. I feel like they got there a year early. I think if they do make it back with this same core, this experience is going to benefit them. So not all is lost if you're a fan of Boston. But Golden State getting another ring, it was great to see. It was an awesome series. And NBA season is now over. And we look to the draft, which is in a week or so, where the Orlando Magic have the first round pick, which I've talked about at length, I think, in my last episode. We're still no closer to knowing who they're going to pick. Could be Chet. It could be somebody else. Still have no idea. I guess we'll have to wait till the draft, but that's only a few weeks away. So there's still some great NBA news to talk about here in the near future. Moving from the hardwood to the ice, we are 2 games into the Stanley Cup Finals with Tampa Bay versus Colorado. My last podcast having Nick Gimbel on, my hockey announcer friend that is also a diehard Avalanche fan, and he was lucky enough to go to Game 2 where they absolutely blew the Lightning off the ice. I think 7-0, beat them by a touchdown there here in Tampa. So they're up 2-0. I'm obviously not going to reach out to Nick in the middle of all this. Hope to have him back on after the finals. But his team's looking good right now. They're 2-0, and the Lightning were, I think, 18-1 off of losses going into the New York Rangers series. And the Rangers were also up, I think, 2-0. So we know it's possible for Tampa to bounce back in these situations, but you got to like where you are if you're a Colorado fan, or some people have gotten to the point they just don't like Tampa. They're in the Patriots level for hockey. They've won too much, winning back-to-back cups. Obviously, being a Floridian, I have no issue with the Lightning. If they come back and win, it'll just be another feather in their cap. They'll have won 3 straight cups, and they'll have to be in the conversation as one of the best modern teams of all time. I say that with very limited knowledge of hockey, but with a little bit of hockey history. I do know, the dynasties that we've gone through, the Penguins and the Red Wings in recent times and things like that. Blackhawks finally they only got their 1 cup, but they've been a very dominant team in the early 2000s, teams like that. You go farther back and you got the Rangers and the Oilers and, of course, the Islanders too. So they're going to be compared to that. I think they've already might just, go winning 2 straight and getting to a third one. That's where that story could end. And it doesn't mean that Nick, eloquently put it pretty well on the last podcast that this is kind of a one-shot deal for Colorado. They only have like 3 or 4 of their players under contract going into next year as it is, where a bulk of this Tampa squad is already going to return. So regardless of what happens with Tampa, I think they're going to be right back in the thick of things next year, but they do have a 2-0 hole to dig themselves out of. And if anyone's going to do it in this modern league, it would be them. But again, if you're a Colorado fan, you got to be feeling pretty good about yourself. So next up, I don't really get to talk a lot of soccer on this show, not because I don't enjoy it, not that I don't follow it, because I do pretty closely, but I don't always have somebody to bounce these ideas off of for soccer. There's plenty of things I would have wanted to talk about going into this year, like Milan winning the Serie A title finally for the first time in like 14 years. I'll talk MLS with anyone that'll listen. Orlando City's doing very well to start the year. Just won on my birthday weekend for the first time in a long time. Usually they don't get it done on my birthday, but they pulled it off against Houston at home Saturday night. So that was a good game. They won 2-1, excuse me. So yeah, I follow soccer pretty well. I just don't always have someone to bounce things off of, but this is something I felt like I could handle myself. This is also a bit of local news. So in 2026, the World Cup is coming to North America. And I say it that way because it's not just the United States. It is Canada, the United States, and Mexico. The entire continent is the host town, host city, whatever you want to call it. So Canada and Mexico are involved in this. And we recently found out there is a World Cup coming later this year in Qatar, however you want to say that name of that country. It gets argued about how do you say it properly. So not this one coming up. If you start hearing about World Cup news, that's not now, but 4 years from now, the World Cup in 2026 will be in North America. And they recently announced the cities that are going to be able to host matches in this World Cup. And I'm now, for the people watching on YouTube, I'm going to throw this graphic up. We got our announced cities here, and you can see it right there. Boom. Okay. So we got New York, New Jersey, and of course, even though of course MetLife Stadium is in New Jersey, they have to call it New York because it sounds better. I think they could just admit to themselves that it's in New Jersey, but that's where we are. The new SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles, AT&T, Jerry World in Dallas, the Levi Stadium in the San Francisco Bay Area, Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, Mercedes-Benz in Atlanta, Seattle's field, Houston's field. That one's a little bit of a head scratcher to me. Gillette Stadium, also a bit of a head scratcher to me. The Link, Philadelphia, which I'm very happy about. We have three stadiums in Canada. That's these two here, and then of course the one in Toronto, BMO Field. We have in Vancouver, excuse me, and we have Mexico City, and then Kansas City Arrowhead Stadium. You notice what's not on that list is Orlando, Florida, and I was pretty upset about that. I mean, it doesn't take if you follow even just the national team, you'll know that the United States men's and women's national team has played many games in Orlando, in Exploria Stadium, for the Gold Cup or various other things. And for them to be excluded from this, and a lot of people say, okay, well, Exploria Stadium is too small. And I agree with that. But we do have Camping World Stadium that holds 65,000 plus people that could probably even be rigged up a little bit more to hold some more. And it's just known as a soccer town. And granted, any of these places people are going to travel to. People will come from all over the world to watch the World Cup. I just think as a tourism city like Orlando is, I think it would be more equipped to handle the flow of traffic. I mean, Miami, I think it came down to us in Miami. I don't think they were going to put two in Florida. Miami got the nod for whatever reason. Atlanta, while it's an NFL stadium too, I think because it's brand new and it's nice and shiny. The two that really, I'm not going to talk about the Canadian because they were always going to get some of these picks. I'm not going to talk about the ones in Mexico. They were always going to get some of these picks. I'm happy for Philadelphia, and obviously it'll be in the middle of the summer, so weather isn't that big of a deal. But to do Philly, Boston, and New York, I think what it came down to is they just, if you're not from this country, you wanted the big name cities in this country, regardless of how well they were equipped to handle the influx of people that'll come to watch a World Cup. The two that are really head scratching for me are Houston and Kansas City. That just seems like weird towns. Houston, granted, one of the biggest cities in the country, probably be able to handle the influx of people, but Kansas City is really the biggest head scratcher to me. I guess it didn't come down to how much these cities were going to be receptive to the game of soccer or football or not. I think it just came down to, what are the biggest cities? I mean, it says it right here. When you have to call the stadium that's clearly in New Jersey, New York, New Jersey, you're just trying to make it sound bigger than it actually is. So, I probably wasn't the only Floridian that was a little bummed that we aren't getting games here in Orlando. I mean, we've had multiple times to see our national team. Chelsea and Arsenal are coming to play a game in Orlando in late July. So clearly, the world knows about Orlando in the soccer space and know that it's very susceptible to these big games. But yeah, it was very disappointing to see that we will not be getting a game. I know I'm damn sure not going all the way to Miami or Atlanta to watch a World Cup game, but that would have been a bucket list thing to, be able to say, regardless of who it is. Obviously, Italy is not in the World Cup as I'm wearing this jersey, but if US was able to play in the Orlando area, that would have been great. But there's some other teams, if Brazil shows up, they're going to get a huge following. If Mexico shows up, going to get a huge following, going to get a lot of people out to these games. So yeah, it was disappointing. A lot of people came together. That was the craziest thing about it. You had meetings that had Disney sitting next to Universal, companies that would never work together in anything else really came together and tried to make this happen. And I hope it's not too discouraging to the fact that these companies won't work together to bring great things to our town. So it was disappointing that they weren't able to get it done, regardless of putting all this together with all these multiple big wigs in our area, all the different counties and mayors and political figures. It didn't matter, if you're a elephant or a donkey, right? Those are the two mascots. I'm not very political, if you guys don't know. But, it didn't matter because you were all going for this one thing to make your community better. And, unfortunately, it did not happen, which is very disappointing. But the World Cup in the United States in general, still a big deal. And while it's still 4 years away, I'm very excited for it, but definitely bummed about Orlando. So I mentioned at the top of the show that there is some celebration in order here, as the USFL has completed its 10-game regular season and will have its playoffs starting next year, starting in Canton, Ohio, at the Hall of Fame Stadium where the Hall of Fame game typically takes place. So they are moving out of Birmingham for the playoffs, which I think was a good move. It definitely gives it a different a different style, a different feel. And not to mention, a lot of people have complained that, a 9-1 Birmingham team getting every game at home has to have affected their record at least a little bit, because that definitely brought out the biggest crowds in that area. And we are down to a 14 playoff, and it's been a long time since a spring football league like this has made it to its playoff and at least completed its regular season. As we know, the XFL was cut off by COVID, and I'm fairly convinced that if COVID doesn't happen, the XFL is in its third or fourth season right now. Things are going great for them. Obviously, that's not something they could have planned on, so I don't put it against them. We all know the debacle that the AAF had. That is something you can blame on the people involved. There's a great documentary out there on Amazon Prime called Broken Alliance. If you're ever curious about what really went down with that Alliance of American Football League, very well done. I'm acquaintances with some of the people that had a hand in making that, so very good. I forget how much it is still on there. It's probably dropped in price since it's been out for a while. But yeah, great movie about that. Great documentary if you want to check that out. But we are down to 4 teams, as I mentioned. Okay, so we are down to the Philadelphia Stars, the Birmingham Stallions, the New Jersey Generals, and again, shout out to them for calling themselves New Jersey and not New York, even though they would eventually play in New Jersey, and the New Orleans Breakers. So those are the 4 teams we are down to. The New Jersey Generals and the Birmingham Stallions both coming in at 9-1, and I believe the other 2 teams are 6-4. Philly making it, obviously, I was happy about. I mostly watched their games, as well as the Tampa Bay Bandits, who just missed the playoffs. They had to win like their last 2 games. It kind of came down to them in New Orleans. New Orleans beat them 2 weeks ago to get that final spot. And one thing that's very interesting to me about the way this league shook out is during the XFL, we all knew about PJ Walker winning the MVP, running away with it as a QB for Houston, got him a contract with the Carolina Panthers, which I still believe he's in the league to this day. The second best quarterback in the XFL when it was going on was Jordan Tiamu, who was with the Seattle Battlehawks, I believe was the name of that team. And he was lighting the league up just as much as PJ Walker. He's the quarterback for Tampa, and he's played, I will say, above average in their 10-game season. And I'm curious if that means that the level of play in this league was a little bit better. Obviously, the guys around him are going to be different. Maybe the team he played for not Seattle, the St. Louis Battlehawks. If the team that he played for in St. Louis was just better, or maybe the competition was a little bit less, but it was a good measuring stick, because not all these guys I was familiar with going into this league, but I knew for a fact Jordan Chiamo looked very good in the XFL, and he definitely regressed a little bit playing in this USFL. So I don't know if that means that this league is a little better than what the XFL was, and the XFL is on its way back. They're inviting players to the combine, some guys that I know, from watching in college and stuff. So we'll hear more about the XFL as stuff rolls out moving to next year. Supposedly we have a team in Orlando, so that'll give me a reason to watch that. But yeah, looking into this, I could definitely see Birmingham, running away with it. They've been the best team all year, but some of that could come with the fact that they've got every home game leading in this regular season. I think it's pretty obvious that they're not going to do this bubble thing moving next year. And while people didn't like it, it was a cost-saving measure, and you can't argue with the results of them actually finishing the regular season. So that is a positive with them for sure. I'm obviously pulling for Philly to pull this away. If Birmingham does win, they do have Marlon Williams, a former UCF wide receiver, on their team. So I would very much be happy if he won a professional football championship. He was on our national championship team in 2017. So the guy knows how to get rings as it is. But I'm pulling for Philly in this. New Jersey's also played very well. New Orleans just seems like the wild card in this. Philly's played well pretty much all year. New Orleans looked out of it at one point. I'm not sure how they really snuck in there at the end. But I'm pulling for Philly. I think Birmingham does have the best chance. And again, it's very cool that it's in Canton, Ohio. It's at the Football Hall of Fame Stadium, like you've seen the preseason games in the NFL. So it'll have a different vibe, and I'm sure people will come out to this. It's only it'll be 3 games total, probably 2 on one weekend, the championship the next weekend. If nothing else, the championship game should have a good amount of crowd. So definitely looking forward to that. It's going to move them into season 2 that they're going to have next year. They've already talked about, I guess, Michigan. They did something pretty interesting. So that it was Michigan and one of the other teams. They're both 1-8. It was Pittsburgh and Michigan. They were both 1-8 not very good seasons this year. And they ended up playing the last game of the season. And they, since it, I don't know if it, because it lined up that way or if they flip-flopped some scheduling around, but the 2 1-8 teams played, and the winner will get the number 1 pick next year, not the loser. So I don't know if that's something they will kind of manually do every year. All right, the 2 worst records play the last game of the season, so it's still worth something. So they get the first round pick in whatever sort of supplemental draft they have next year, and they'll have the first pick of every round too. So that definitely helps them to, I believe it was Michigan ended up winning. So Jeff Fisher's squad out there will have a chance to get better moving forward. So definitely an interesting concept that they were able to pull off. It probably gave them a little bit more ratings. I mean, who's watching 2 1-8 teams in the last week of a regular season of a spring game? At least it gave them something to play for and fight over. And Michigan did pull that off. So, going into this coming week, I'll definitely be watching the USFL playoffs. I want to get Joey on probably right before the championship game, and we will just review what we thought of the season as a whole, as you guys have gotten some of my thoughts throughout the year, but we're going to really talk about the whole season when I can have him on, hopefully before the championship game. So USFL going strong, about to have their first championship game since the 80s, since this is technically by namesake only a continuation of that league, but not anybody involved was the same. So pulling for Philly, I'll take Birmingham just because of some of the guys on the team. And if New Jersey or New Orleans wins, good for them, because neither of those teams have had championships in a while in any sport either. So I think you can say that about, Philly, the Eagles Super Bowl, it's feeling farther and farther away. But other than Philly, none of these teams have had championships in the very recent future. So we'll see how that goes. And if you haven't checked out the USFL at all, now might be your chance. So there's 3 games left of the playoffs. It's the best teams in that league. I would recommend giving it a try. I personally have always liked these kind of off-kilter leagues. For example, like the Big 3 basketball just started that Ice Cube owns. It's their 5th season. They took a year off for COVID. I did miss some of it this weekend due to birthday plans and stuff. I didn't watch a lot of it, but also a fun time. I think I talked about it last year. It's on CBS a lot. They stream a lot of games on YouTube. A lot of former NBA players you might know. Rashard Lewis is kind of the face of the league. A lot of NBA legends are coaches in some cases. Fun time. So these off-kilter leagues, if you enjoy the sport itself, you're going to like it. I think I can spot the difference for football, for example. Some people are football fans and I'll watch arena football. I almost went to an arena football game over this past weekend. I'll watch Canadian football if it's on. I don't seek it out. So there's people that are NFL fans or just college football fans. But me, I say I'm a football fan. I'll watch any version of the sport as long as it is, entertaining the more you watch it. So if you want to expand yourself out of the regular NFL and college football, if you enjoy just watching it as it is, check out one of these leagues. If you're an NBA fan, check out the Big 3. There's going to be a lot more names in there than you realize if you're a big diehard NBA fan. But I think I might just leave it at that, guys. Just I was sitting around on my birthday. Like I said, nobody's around. Since it's a Monday, bad luck turning 30 on Monday. I'm going to go out and have some fun. I'll find something to do. But I wanted to put a few new podcasts out I want to test out my new mic too. I had a new microphone for my birthday. So appreciate my sister for that and my wife for letting her know which one to get. So I just wanted to try out the microphone. I figured why not record a podcast. So we'll have the Wrestler Report back here before Forbidden Door this coming weekend. So I want to thank you guys for listening. Hope you have a great Monday and a great week of sports, and I'll see you next time.